Tiberius was one of Rome's most rejected emperors, a leader who ruled under a shadow of disapproval and mistrust. But here's the surprising point. Despite being overlooked by many in history, his policies shaped the Roman Empire in ways most people never realize. He may not have been the grand hero celebrated in books, but the impact of his actions reverberated far beyond his reign. You may have heard of Tiberius as the emperor who preferred isolation, criticized for his grim and even tyrannical decisions. But what few understand is that his political and economic reforms, so unpopular at the time, set Rome on a course for stability that extended well beyond his death. What if I told you that Tiberius' apparent apathy and coldness were, in fact, part of a clever strategy that ensured Rome's survival? So why did such an unpopular emperor leave such a deep and lasting mark? What was the secret behind his decisions that guaranteed Rome an unexpected stability? Today, we'll uncover the hidden legacy of Tiberius, exploring how his quiet actions and controversial policies shaped the Rome we all know. Stay until the end to discover how a rejected leader became one of the most important architects of the empire. Let's begin. Tiberius Claudius Nero was never destined for the imperial throne. Born into a powerful family, his path to power was more a series of unfortunate events than a calculated rise. His predecessor and stepfather, Augustus, groomed him reluctantly, always viewing him as a last resort rather than a prime choice. Tiberius himself displayed little enthusiasm for leadership, often withdrawing from public life whenever possible. His early military career, though successful, seemed like an obligation rather than a passion, setting the tone for his eventual rule over Rome. Augustus' indecisiveness left a political vacuum that Tiberius filled somewhat grudgingly. Unlike his stepfather, who cultivated a charismatic image, Tiberius was cold, withdrawn, and distant. His ascension to power came not with fanfare, but with whispers of discontent. The Roman Senate tolerated him, but admiration was scarce. Tiberius' reluctance to embrace the grandeur of Rome's imperial image led many to see him as unworthy of the position he inherited. Yet behind the facade of disinterest, there were subtle moves being made, decisions that would have far-reaching consequences. One of the first challenges Tiberius faced was maintaining the legacy of Augustus while navigating the treacherous waters of Roman politics. The expectations placed upon him were immense, and his reluctance to charm the Senate or the people made his position even more precarious. Augustus had left behind a carefully constructed image of imperial power and stability, and Tiberius seemed like a shadow in comparison. However, what he lacked in public relations, he compensated for in a shrewd understanding of the political machinery around him. Despite his detachment, Tiberius was no fool. His military background provided him with a strategic mindset, which he applied not only on the battlefield, but also in governance. He quietly consolidated power, ensuring that his rule would be secure from the ever-present threat of usurpers. This understated approach to leadership, though lacking the charisma of Augustus, proved effective in stabilizing his reign. Tiberius' cold demeanor may have alienated many, but his strategic acumen was undeniable. As the years passed, Tiberius grew even more isolated, both from the Senate and the people. Yet this isolation was not a sign of weakness. It was part of a larger strategy to secure his control over the empire. He may not have relished the role of emperor, but his understanding of power and control would come to define his reign. The reluctance that once seemed like a flaw would, in time, reveal itself as a calculated distance, a way to remain above the petty rivalries of Roman politics. Tiberius' reign marked a shift in Rome's economic policies, a shift that would have long-term implications for the empire. One of his most notable moves was his focus on fiscal conservatism. Unlike previous rulers who engaged in lavish public spending to win the favor of the populace, Tiberius prioritized austerity. He believed that the empire's wealth should be safeguarded, not squandered on festivals, monuments, or unnecessary military campaigns. This approach was met with criticism at the time, as the people and Senate expected grand gestures of generosity from their emperor. Instead of expansive projects, Tiberius implemented a more controlled and measured fiscal policy. He reduced public spending significantly, focusing instead on ensuring that Rome's treasury remained healthy. While this angered many who enjoyed the benefits of Augustus' more generous policies, it laid the groundwork for the empire's financial stability. In times of crisis, Rome would later rely on the reserves that Tiberius had so carefully accumulated. Though unpopular in the moment, these decisions created a buffer that allowed the empire to weather economic downturns and external threats. This frugality, however, came at a political cost. Many saw Tiberius' reluctance to spend as further proof of his cold and uncaring nature. The public, accustomed to the largesse of previous emperors, viewed him as stingy and distant. Yet beneath the surface, his policies were working. Rome was becoming more financially secure, even as discontent simmered among the elites and the masses. Tiberius knew that a strong economy was the backbone of a stable empire, and he was willing to endure unpopularity to ensure Rome's long-term survival. Tiberius also shifted the empire's approach to taxation. Rather than imposing heavy taxes on the people to fund public projects, he focused on streamlining tax collection and reducing corruption within the system. His reforms targeted inefficiencies that had long plagued the empire, ensuring that tax revenues were properly accounted for and used more effectively. This move, though not glamorous, helped stabilize Rome's finances and curb the abuses that had drained its resources in the past. In the end, Tiberius' economic policies were a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they ensured the empire's financial stability for years to come. On the other, they deepened his reputation as a distant, authoritarian figure who cared more for numbers than for people. Yet, as history would later show, the stability he created allowed future emperors to build upon his foundation, keeping Rome's economy strong long after his reign. Tiberius' approach to military leadership was as calculated and reserved as his economic policies. Having spent much of his early career in military campaigns, Tiberius was no stranger to warfare. Yet he was not an emperor who glorified battle. Unlike emperors who sought military victories to bolster their reputation, Tiberius focused more on maintaining and securing the existing borders of the empire than on expanding them. His military philosophy was one of consolidation rather than conquest, a strategy that emphasized defense and stability over aggressive expansion. One of his key reforms was the professionalization of the Roman legions. Tiberius sought to transform the military into a more disciplined and self-sufficient force, reducing the influence of personal loyalty to charismatic generals and shifting it towards loyalty to the state. Under his leadership, the Roman army became less a tool of political ambition and more an instrument of imperial control. This transition was crucial in preventing future military leaders from challenging the emperor's authority, a problem that had plagued Rome in earlier times. Tiberius also made important changes to how Rome managed its frontier defenses. Recognizing the limits of the empire's resources, he focused on fortifying borders rather than pursuing risky campaigns into foreign territories. His strategy involved building and maintaining key fortifications along the empire's most vulnerable edges, particularly in regions like Germania, where Rome had suffered humiliating defeats in the past. Rather than attempting to avenge these losses with costly campaigns, Tiberius prioritized stability and security, a move that would protect the empire from overextension. Despite these prudent measures, Tiberius' military reforms were often overshadowed by his absence from the front lines. Unlike some of his predecessors, he did not lead his armies into battle or return to Rome with stories of glorious victories. This led to criticism from those who equated military success with personal valor. However, Tiberius understood that the long-term security of the empire depended not on reckless expansion, but on preserving what had already been gained. His reforms laid the foundation for a more sustainable military structure, one that prioritized defense over the fleeting glory of conquest. The legacy of Tiberius' military reforms can be seen in the relative peace and stability that marked much of his reign. Though his policies lacked the glamour of aggressive campaigns, they ensured that the empire was well protected and capable of defending its vast territories. His focus on discipline and professionalization would resonate for decades, shaping the Roman military into a more efficient and reliable force, even if his personal reputation among the soldiers and the people remained cool and distant. Tiberius' retreat from public life became one of the defining features of his reign, a move that left many Romans questioning his motives and mental state. Early in his rule, he already showed a tendency to withdraw from the spotlight, preferring the quiet of his estates over the chaotic life of Rome. As time passed, this isolation deepened, culminating in his infamous retreat to the island of Capri, where he spent the last decade of his reign. For many, this retreat symbolized the emperor's abandonment of his duties, fueling rumors of decadence and paranoia. But was this isolation truly a sign of decline, or was it part of a larger political strategy? From Capri, Tiberius maintained control over the empire, relying on trusted officials to manage day-to-day governance. His withdrawal from the capital did not mean a complete disengagement from politics. In fact, some historians argue that it was a calculated move to distance himself from the power struggles and constant intrigue that plagued the Roman court. By removing himself from the immediate political fray, Tiberius could govern from a place of safety and neutrality, free from the pressures and dangers of the Senate. This detachment, however, came at a cost. The physical distance between Tiberius and the Roman people created an image of an aloof, disconnected ruler. The Senate, already suspicious of his intentions, took advantage of his absence to increase their own power, leading to a tense relationship between the emperor and the political elite. Tiberius' reliance on trusted figures like Sejanus to govern in his place further fueled rumors of corruption and abuse of power. His retreat, whether strategic or not, became the focal point of criticism, painting him as a leader who had lost touch with the realities of ruling. Tiberius' isolation also gave rise to darker rumors. Stories of depravity, cruelty, and paranoia began to circulate, casting him as a tyrant who indulged in excesses away from the public eye. While many of these tales were likely exaggerated or fabricated by political enemies, they further tarnished his already unpopular image. The Roman people, already uneasy with his distant leadership style, found it easy to believe that their emperor had descended into madness and debauchery. Whether true or not, these perceptions would forever color his legacy. Yet beneath the surface, Tiberius remained a ruler who was deeply conscious of his role in maintaining the stability of the empire. His isolation may have been misunderstood by contemporaries, but it did not diminish the effectiveness of his governance. By retreating from the constant pressure of the Roman court, Tiberius was able to focus on the larger picture of imperial rule, ensuring that the empire remained secure during a time of potential upheaval. His isolation, far from being a sign of weakness, was a deliberate choice that allowed him to rule on his own terms, even as it cost him the affection of the people and the Senate.